Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, a recount requested in a high-profile race for the North Carolina General Assembly, plus the SAVE Act is finally beginning to move its way through the United States Senate. We'll have the details on both of those stories and more coming up. And a good Wednesday morning to you, and welcome into the Nick Craig Show here on this Wednesday morning, streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take this program with you 24/7 on demand in your favorite podcast app by simply searching for the Nick Craig Show. You can also listen online, maybe at your computer at work, wherever, by visiting the website nickcraig.com. Our program this morning is brought to you by the Law Group here in Wilmington. Visit them online, lawgroupnc.com, or give them a call, 910-251-6088. We'll hear more from them coming up a little bit later on in the program this morning. We have got a jam-packed Wednesday for you. There's a lot going on here across North Carolina, a lot going on across the nation as well. We'll touch on the SAVE Act, some pretty significant movement on that last night. We'll get into some of those details coming up, but we'll start here in North Carolina, where the high-profile race between the longest-serving Senate president in North Carolina history, Phil Berger, and Rockingham County Sheriff Sam Page continues to play out across the Tar Heel State. For those that have been following this over the last couple of weeks, the vote margin, the vote separation right now is 23 votes. Sam Page, the Rockingham County Sheriff, who is not currently serving in the General Assembly, well, he's currently the Sheriff of Rockingham County, is up 23 votes on Phil Berger, who is the President Pro Tem in the North Carolina General Assembly. Yesterday was an interesting day. We saw the county canvass process play out last Friday. Yesterday was the deadline at 12 noon and 5 p.m., two different deadlines for candidates, not only in this race, but across the state, to make A, ballot challenges, and B, request a recount. We'll start with the recount. That was those requests were due in to the North Carolina State Board of Elections or local county board of elections by 12 noon yesterday. And, well, that's where we begin, where Phil Berger has requested that full recount, a full recount in that race in both Rockingham and the northern portions of Guilford County. He did release a letter, the letter was released, I should say more accurately, by the State Board of Elections yesterday, exactly what Phil Berger was looking to accomplish, and the letter reads as follows. Pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, we'll just kind of breeze over that part, I request that a recount be conducted under the supervision of the North Carolina State Board of Elections for Senate District 26 race in the counties of Guilford and Rockingham. Based on the review of available records of the Senate District 26 race, there are 1 overvote and 134 undervotes in Rockingham County, as well as 2 overvotes and 83 undervotes in Guilford County, which totals more than the 23-vote margin in the Senate District 26 race. These overvotes and undervotes could very likely determine the outcome of this race. Therefore, I request that during the initial recount, which will be done by a machine, any ballot that a machine identifies as having an overvote or undervote be counted by hand by a bipartisan team or of 4 to determine voter choice consistent with North Carolina General Statute. This is an interesting request here from the Berger team. And for those that don't follow elections super closely, this term overvote and undervote is something you may not be familiar with, something that you may have not heard before. Let's start with what an overvote is. For example, in the race between Phil Berger and Sam Page, there were 2 candidates in that race. You voted for either Berger or Page. If for some reason you decided to check both of those bubbles or fill both of those bubbles in on election day, that is what would, or during early voting, that would be considered an overvote. You're only allowed to choose up to 1 in that contest. So some people, I guess, not reading the directions correctly, not understanding exactly what they were doing, could have easily filled in both of those bubbles. That is determined as an overvote. You are not allowed to vote for two people in a pick one contest. So in total, you've got 3 overvotes between Rockingham and Guilford County. Now that gets into a more interesting, kind of more in the weeds discussion over what is described as voter intent. For example, many individuals, if they somehow change their mind while they're in the voting booth, they will put a mark through maybe their first choice and kind of mark up the ballot in a different area. Regardless, the machine, the tabulator that is responsible for looking at the bubbles that you filled in on your ballot, that machine just sees that 2 things were filled in. It can't determine whether something was crossed out or not, and it says, okay, this is an overvote in that contest. So that is 3 ballots potentially that Berger is challenging, or is asking for, in this case, a hand-eye recount for real people to determine exactly what the voter's intent was. Undervote is a completely different ballpark. Undervote is simply you didn't vote in the contest. And we see this a lot, especially in years where you've got a presidential election where the ballot is very long, very lengthy. You've got a president potentially at the top of the ticket, a member of the United States Senate, Congress members, the North Carolina General Assembly, county commission, judges, school board members, soil and water, sheriff, dog catcher. I mean, all of these things. Sometimes this ballot can be like a page and a half long. And so undervote is a very real thing, meaning that somebody decided not to vote in the contest. And that can be for a variety of issues. They didn't like either of the candidates, so they decided not to vote. They didn't know either of the candidates, and they didn't want to vote for somebody they didn't know about or really understand, so they decided not to vote. So when you look at this discussion and this letter that Berger sent to the North Carolina State Board of Elections on Tuesday, I don't think that these undervotes are going to play a major part in it because, frankly, people just sometimes don't finish the ballot. And for me, I find that shocking. For many of you that are very politically in tune and politically inclined, you probably find that hard to believe, but you can look at any recent election in North Carolina. The races at the top of the ticket always have more total votes than those further down. It is called ballot drop-off, and it is very real, and it is more interesting, especially when you get down to local races during a general election. Things like county commission, things like school board that are much less high profile than Congress, than the General Assembly, than a president, senators, so on and so forth. People just leave those races blank. They do not finish the ballot. So those are the initial requests from Phil Berger with first a machine recount. So they'll run, I believe, there's about 26,000 votes in the race split across both counties. They'll run all 26,000 ballots, or the exact number, through a high-speed tabulator, and it will spit back out results. Those results will likely be exactly the same, if not maybe a 1-vote difference from the totals that we have right now. The interesting thing that Phil Berger is requesting is this hand-eye recount for ballots that are undervotes and overvotes. He can request that. It is not immediately clear whether the North Carolina State Board of Elections is going to require both the Guilford and Rockingham County Board of Elections to go through that process. And right now, they could very easily start with this full-on machine recount, run every ballot through, see what the difference is. Berger then could go on later down the road and request this hand-eye recount for these undervote and overvote ballots that he and his team have identified, and essentially kind of see where things end up after that. So this is the first part of what we saw yesterday in this ongoing contest, which is very high stakes. Phil Berger has been in the North Carolina General Assembly since the year 2001. He won in the year 2000. He has been serving there for the last 26 years. Since 2011, he has been the Speaker of the North Carolina Senate, and to his credit, was able to dramatically change the state of North Carolina. Between him, Tom Tillis and Tim Moore, they ushered in the great things that we see now in North Carolina, which is reduced property taxes, reduced corporate taxes, reduced income tax across the state of North Carolina. He ushered those things in over his 15 years in office. However, he has fallen out of favor with voters in his district, which has at this point led Sam Page to his 23-vote victory that he has as of right now. As I was just mentioning, the recount request came in yesterday. That was due by the noon to the North Carolina State Board of Elections. That was all filed on time. Then there was a second deadline. I mentioned that in the first segment. A second deadline. That was 5 p.m. yesterday. And that was for something that is called voter challenges or voter protests. And that is a completely different situation that is playing out. But similarly, we did see Berger make some of those challenges. He is specifically challenging 13 different ballots that were cast in both Rockingham and Guilford counties. It's important to note when you look at Senate District 26 on a map, it includes all of Rockingham County, which is the home county of both Berger and Page, where Page is currently the sheriff, and northern portions of Guilford County that comprise Senate District 26. So we learned late in the evening last night that he was going to be challenging some ballots. They started popping on to the North Carolina State Board of Elections website. And this is another interesting situation that we are watching play out as well. The margin is still the same right now. The recount has not happened yet. Both of these things kind of happening in unison at the same time on Tuesday. Looking at the first protest levied by Berger, which was filed with the state board, they are claiming that at least 8 Guilford County voters eligible to vote in the Senate District 26 race were given ballots that did not include the contest between Berger and Page. Now, this is an allegation. These are voters that said, oh no, I didn't see that race. That could be true. That may have been the case. It may also not be true because after people just generally don't have the greatest memory with things. So there's at least 8 voters, according to the Berger team, that should have received a ballot that had the contest between him and Page on it that did not receive that. Now, in the letter that to the state board, it reads, "We are unable to independently confirm the ballot style actually issued to each voter because those records are uniquely within the possession, custody, and control of the Guilford County Board of Elections and the State Board of Elections." The protest then goes on to argue that if eligible voters were given incorrect ballots, they were effectively denied their constitutional right to vote in that contest. It then goes through and cites a litany of North Carolina state law that would allow remedies when voters are issued the wrong ballot style, including the possibility of allowing those affected voters to recast their ballots. These are all accusations at this point. It is not clear whether these 8 individuals received the right ballot or not. Maybe they thought they should have received this ballot, but they're actually not supposed to. For those that vote in North Carolina elections, you've gone through this process. You go to the check-in station. Somebody asks you what your name is, what your address is. You show them a copy of your ID. They hand you, I think it's what is called an ATV form that's got all of your information on it. You're asked to sign at the bottom of it. You do that. You walk over to another table. They use a barcode. They scan this form that you've been given. They then scan a ballot. They give it to you. You vote and then push it into the vote tabulator and get your little sticker, and you're done with your day. And so the likelihood of 8 different individuals in this contest not receiving the right ballot, at least to me, from this vantage point, this period of time, seems highly unlikely. This is likely a situation where voters misremember what they got. Maybe they didn't remember that was on there. It's possible. It's not beyond the realm of possibility. All of this stuff is has human input. So this is a situation where, yes, there could be some level of human error. However, it seems relatively unlikely that it was 8 people in, again, a small contest. You're only talking about 26 or so thousand votes in Rockingham and Northern Guilford County combined. The protest then goes on and it pulls up an interesting or shows an interesting text message that apparently people throughout Senate District 26 were receiving. It was this image was paid for, according to the image, by the North Carolina Election Integrity Fund. And it says, Sheriff Sam Page's Legal Defense Fund here. Phil Berger's campaign is asking voters to claim that they received the wrong ballot in an effort to change his election defeat. If anyone from the Berger campaign is pressuring you to sign something that isn't true, please reply to this message or call this phone number and let us know. Submitting a false affidavit is a felony. Help put a stop to these dirty tricks. Signed, the Sheriff Sam Page Legal Defense Fund. It's got an image at the top that says false affidavit equals felony, and they are asserting, the Berger campaign is asserting, that this text message is being used as voter intimidation. The Page team is claiming that these calls and text messages that are being made, or even visits from those affiliated with the Berger team, are paramount to some level of intimidation as well. So it's a little bit of a back and forth match between those two individuals. All of that taking place in Guilford County. There are 3 more protests in Rockingham County. 2 deal with individuals who claim that they did change their party affiliation, presumably from Democrat to Republican. However, voter records in Rockingham County do not indicate that, so they were unable to vote in the Republican primary. As you're aware, the way in which primary elections play out here in North Carolina, if you are a Republican, you vote in the Republican primary. Democrat primary. If you're unaffiliated, you get to choose one or the other. Not both, but one or the other. That is how our primary works. So if you're Democrat and want to vote in the Republican primary, you can't do that. There's a deadline in which before the election, you have to go through the process of changing your party affiliation to be eligible in the contest. So that includes 2 more voters in Rockingham County. And then finally, the 4th protest is seeking to remove ballots from 3 unaffiliated voters who requested a Democrat ballot when they originally checked in to vote, however, then decided to change their mind, saying, actually, no, I don't want a Democrat ballot. I want a Republican ballot. Those ballots were accepted, the Republican ballots accepted by the by the Rockingham County Board of Elections, I should say. And so the 4th protest says that those ballots should, in fact, be removed and not added to the count. When all of this is combined, as I mentioned at the top, we're talking about 13 additional votes, which still leaves the margin, assuming that every single one of these votes that we are just talking about with these protests, assuming every single one of them is thrown out or changed, and all of those votes are in favor of Berger or against Page, the margin would still be 10 votes. And at that point, again, the likelihood of there being 10 incorrect ballots through the recount process still seems incredibly low. If this contest had hundreds of thousands of votes in it, potentially even millions, which you see with statewide elections, I'd say that there would be a possibility to make up a couple of votes here or there. With as small of a contest as this is, with as little wiggle room and margin as there is, even with these protests, even with the recount request, it seems very unlikely that Berger is going to be able to make up this 23-vote margin. I'll note it is within his right as a candidate to file these protests, to call for this recount. It's only a 23-vote margin in the race. However, I hope that he does not take this and drag this on for months and months and months and turn this into a nasty, ugly, messy legal battle. And so we'll keep an eye on the recount and these voter protests over the next couple of days. Interesting question coming in on our Rumble live chat this morning. This is a contest I didn't know anything about. Why did Berger fall out of favor? It's casinos. Back in, 2023, I guess? I guess it would have been 2023 or 2024. There was a provision in the budget that was introduced by the North Carolina Senate that would have legalized casinos across North Carolina. And one of the areas in which a casino could have been built was Rockingham County, which is where Phil Berger lives and where he represents. The individuals, the voters, the constituents in Rockingham County wanted absolutely nothing to do with the casino, there was an incredible amount of blowback from areas that people that lived in those areas. Rockingham County is very far north. It's, by the way, just over the border from Danville, Virginia. So there is a casino literally right across the state line. As I remember it, and you'll have to excuse probably some inaccurate information, this was a couple of years ago. One of the arguments that was made by Republicans in the General Assembly that were in favor of adding the casino was, hey, people that live in the northern half of the county, or the state, excuse me, they are driving across state lines, they're going to Virginia, and they're gambling their money away. And obviously people, not everybody's in favor of gambling. Not everybody likes that, but people do in fact do it. It's why Las Vegas exists and Atlantic City exists. It's why there's a casino in Danville, Virginia. There's casinos all over the country because in fact people do like to gamble. Whether you think it's morally right or wrong, that's not the discussion that we're having here this morning. So with that, you had some people saying, again, the money is just going across the border. If we know people are going to be gambling, if we know that's what people want to do, why not build one in North Carolina and collect the tax revenue? That message did not play very well with voters in northern North Carolina, specifically in and around the Rockingham County area, and he received a lot of blowback for that. There were major protests outside of government buildings. I mean, it was a real political shit show, no pun intended, for Phil Berger, and it, I think, cost him a lot politically. Plus, I mean, let's be honest about this. Leadership tends to get a little bit stagnant. Phil Berger has been the head of the North Carolina Senate now for 15 years. And that's a long time to be doing anything. And we have seen over the last couple of years, we saw it just over the last year, the unwillingness for the Republican majority in the North Carolina House and Senate to get together. The Republicans have the majority in Raleigh. They do. Yet we do not have a budget. The fiscal year started July 1 of 2025. Republicans in the Senate and Republicans in the House could not come together on a budget. That is in large part due to tax code and issues. I believe that voters in that area are just, they want to change. They want something different. They obviously are not in love with their current representation. And that is why this primary contest, in which I'll note, Phil Berger and affiliated groups spent nearly $10 million to try and win. He is now down 23 votes over Rockingham County Sheriff Sam Page, who only raised $81,000 in this race. 10 million versus 81,000, and Page is currently leading by 23 votes. So I think there's a variety of different factors that plays into voters, specifically in Rockingham County, who outvoted or voted Sam Page over Phil Berger like 3-1. They were not a fan of what obviously the leadership that they are getting in Raleigh. So those are some, I think, of the factors that played into this. And now we just kind of wait and see. The Guilford County Board of Elections is set to convene at 9 o'clock this morning. The State Board of Elections has a meeting at 10 o'clock this morning. The Rockingham County Board of Elections meets at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. So there's a very strong possibility that by Friday, we have a good idea as to what exactly this is going to look like. I will be watching the State Board of Elections meeting at 10 o'clock. I'll be posting updates on X and Facebook for that. So give me a follow over on X at Nicholas M. Craig, or like the Nick Craig Show over on Facebook. I'll keep you up to date with what of any of these protest decisions that come out of that meeting. I'll bring you all of that on social media. And obviously, as it is relevant, we'll bring it up either tomorrow morning or Friday when we get some more final numbers. So the total vote tally right now remains at 23 votes. That is where it has been over the last couple of weeks now. And that is what we are going to be watching play out. This is the final. Let's see if I can pull this up here. This is the final tally as it stands right now. 13,136 votes for Sam Page, 13,113 for Phil Berger. That's the margin. And you would presume that from the Berger camp, between the undervotes and overvotes, between some of these voter protests, they are looking to try and get as many ballots thrown out as possible to bring that margin as close as possible so that the possibility of a recount, which very well could change by 1 or 2 votes, is enough to potentially put this at a tie or get Phil Berger over the finish line. So we'll watch that process as it plays out today. We're going to grab a quick break. On the other side, we are going to dig into the SAVE Act. We've talked about it a couple of different times over the last few months. There was some pretty significant movement on the floor of the United States Senate yesterday. We'll get into those details coming up here in just a couple of minutes. But before that, I want to thank the Law Group here in Wilmington and tell you about them and tell you how much I appreciate Melissa Gott and her team and their continued support of the program. When legal challenges arise, make sure you put your trust in the Law Group. Since 2003, their experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across eastern North Carolina. I had the pleasure of working with Melissa and her team almost 6 years ago when I went through the process of purchasing my home. I was a first-time home buyer. I will admit, very evergreen in what was going on, did not exactly understand the process, didn't know everything of what home ownership was going to be like, what sort of process needed to be followed. I immediately reached out to Melissa Gott and her team, and they helped me walk through every step of the process, got me to the closing table. Everything was done on time. I'll note this was in the middle of COVID-19, so things were a little bit screwy and different with mandates and everything. Regardless, the Law Group got everything done on time, and it was incredibly affordable. I'm glad I worked with the Law Group. Their dedicated team ensures that your questions are answered and any issues that might pop up are resolved as quickly as possible. Great news, folks. They're located in downtown Wilmington, and they're just a phone call away at 910-251-6088, or you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. That's 910-251-6088, or visit them online, lawgroupnc.com. It's the Law Group. Experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate the Law Group and their continued support of the Nick Craig Show. All right, quick break. We will talk about the SAVE Act and hear from some moronic Democrats coming up after this as the Nick Craig Show continues. Streaming live this morning, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. Good Wednesday to you, and welcome back to the Nick Craig Show. We are now going to turn our attention to Washington, D.C., where debate began yesterday on the Save America Act. We've talked about it before, but kind of a quick refresher of this legislation and what it looks to do. It's pretty simple. It makes it easy to vote and hard to cheat. It makes it so that states across the U.S., of course, predominantly targeting blue states that are loosey-goosey with the rules, that they verify citizenship of voters before they allowed to cast a ballot, to vote in an election. It also has some provisions dealing with voter ID, which we have here in North Carolina. It obviously works to the chagrin of Democrats who constantly yell and scream, talk about how the sky is falling when you require people to show an ID to vote. We just had primary elections here in North Carolina, right? We were just talking about the Sam Page-Phil Berger race. We had primaries 2 weeks ago here in North Carolina. It was the highest turnout ever in a midterm primary, the highest ever in North Carolina history. Voter ID exists here in North Carolina. So anytime you hear a Democrat claim, make the point, allude to the fact that voter ID suppresses turnout, they are completely full of it. There is no evidence, no data, nothing that they can point to that says when you require people to show a valid form of identification, which for 99.9% of people is a valid driver's license, when you ask them to show their identification and verify who they are to vote, it does not suppress turnout. We've seen two states recently, North Carolina and Georgia, that have enacted voter ID. And the arguments in both of these states, both by Democrats, were that you're going to suppress voters, you're disenfranchising voters, people aren't going to be able to figure this out, they can't show up and vote. In both of those states, with multiple elections now, including a presidential election back in 2024, municipal elections last year, primaries already this year in North Carolina, it has not come to fruition. It's just not true. I don't have any other way to try and drive this point home. There is nothing to back up these claims, nothing to back up these arguments. It is completely fabricated and made up by those on the political left. And I don't really even understand the point of the argument. What's the point here? That people, that voters, that American citizens are so incompetent, are so stupid that they can't figure out how to show an ID? There's this meme that the left continues to roll out, that there's tens of millions of Americans that don't have a valid form of identification. I inherently reject that premise. You can't go through any facet of your life without a valid form of ID, whether it's a driver's license for those that are of driving age or a valid state photo ID. Every single state issues non-driver's license IDs. And you see many older individuals that are no longer driving. Maybe they're not capable of driving anymore. They have valid IDs. They're just non-driver's licenses, but they're still state-issued IDs. They have those. So everybody's got an ID. This argument that they don't, that voters are so stupid, they're so incompetent that they can't figure out how to get an ID, I just inherently reject. I think the American people are smarter than the Democrats want to give them credit for. So there's a couple of different pieces and factors that lay into the Save America Act, which the president and Republicans have been pushing very hard for. Yesterday, it really got the ball moving in the United States Senate, where this legislation has already passed the United States House. Senate Republicans voted Tuesday evening to launch debate on the Save America Act. Senators voted 51-48 to take up the House-passed Save America Act that would institute these new regulations that I just mentioned. There were two Republicans that did not vote for it. Senator Lisa Murkowski, the Republican from Alaska, voted against opening the debate for whatever reason. Who knows? She's not a super consistent vote, unfortunately, for Republicans. And everybody's favorite, United States Senator from the great state of North Carolina, old Tom Tillis, did not vote. He stated that he was not going to vote in favor of it, but then apparently got stuck in Charlotte due to the DHS shutdown caused by the Democrats. So he wasn't even in the United States Senate to cast a vote, so he did not vote for it. Both aired concerns with the process. So no surprise there. Tillis, on his way out, continues to give a big middle finger to Republicans and conservatives, not only across the state of North Carolina, but across the nation as well, with his just constant nonsense that we see from him. Now, this is not likely going to be a quick process. As I was doing some research on this yesterday, trying to understand exactly how this was going to play out, the Senate is expected to spend days, maybe even weeks, debating this bill. And so this is not something that is going to happen today, tomorrow, over the next couple of days. There is a very strong likelihood that the debate continues in the United States Senate for weeks. We will see Democrats will likely, and the reason it's likely to go for weeks is that Democrats will continually probably bring forward various amendments to the legislation. Those amendments will be debated for hours or days, then go to a vote. There's a very strategic way in which you can bog down and essentially logjam the entire process, and that is likely what we are going to see in the coming days and weeks as this legislation is now up for debate on the floor of the United States Senate. Conservatives like Senator Mike Lee, the Republican from Utah, is still advocating for forcing a talking filibuster, which he argues they can overcome the usual 60-vote legislative threshold by requiring Democrats to hold the floor in order to block the bill. But after weeks of internal conversations, Republicans, the majority of Republicans in the Senate, have rejected that effort, which they fear could tie up the floor essentially indefinitely and potentially let Democrats hijack the Senate agenda by forcing amendment votes on their own priorities. Instead, Senate Majority Leader John Thune is expected to call up several amendments, including a proposal to expand the bill to include Trump-backed restrictions on mail voting, on transgender women participating in women's sports, and on gender-affirming surgery for minors. Thune's move will limit the Democrats' ability to call up their own amendments and try and sidetrack the bill, according to Politico. Democrats have other options to lay this process out. However, such a move as adjourning the Senate would essentially kill the bill. So this is going to be a fascinating process to watch play out. I watched some C-SPAN 2 had the debate taking place yesterday. And as you can imagine, and I'll have some clips for you coming up here in just a couple of minutes, it's exactly what you would expect. I mean, it's Democrat after Democrat after Democrat standing up on the floor of the United States Senate. Some of them have little poster boards behind them. The one I saw yesterday before I turned the TV off said, I don't remember exactly what it said, but it said something like, married women cannot vote with the SAVE Act. I mean, it's just the most ridiculous things that you can possibly imagine. I guess Democrats don't understand the process that many women go through every single day of changing their name when they get married. And that tends to be a pretty common practice here in the United States. When you have a man and woman that gets married, the female usually takes the man's last name. That's a pretty common practice. Many people are familiar with it. You have to get new IDs. You go through and change all of that stuff over. While it may not be the most exciting process in the world, literally millions of people have done it, and women are able to figure it out. I know that the Democrats want to point out that a whole bunch of groups of individuals are just too stupid and incompetent to figure this stuff out. If women can figure out how to change their last name when they get married and get a new ID and go through this entire process, I feel very confident that for women across the United States of America, if they truly want to vote, they will figure out the process. The same way that they figure out how to get a new driver's license, how to get a new passport, how to go through all of this stuff when they get married. Again, this stuff happens literally every single day. So you're going to have to excuse me that I'm not going to buy into these memes and narratives that certain people are just so incompetent that they're unable to do anything. That's what the Democrats push for. Great comment being brought up in our chat. Minorities and women can't do anything. Yeah, that's pretty much what Democrats argue. They're too stupid. They're too incompetent to figure this stuff out. This is the Democrat Party, ladies and gentlemen. It is called bigotry of low expectations. And that is exactly what Democrats continue to push. You have seen it for years now, and you are seeing it again as it relates to the SAVE Act. So, as I mentioned, the floor debate for the SAVE Act began yesterday. All of this, by the way, I'll note while we're in the midst of a partial DHS shutdown, which is causing huge issues at airports across the United States. That's a completely separate issue. You've got confirmation hearings taking place for the senator from Oklahoma, Markwayne Mullins, to become the new head of DHS. There is a lot going on right now throughout the federal government. But again, focusing in on the SAVE Act, Democrats took to the Senate floor last night to debate this legislation. And let's just listen in. Maybe we're wrong about this, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe us on the political right, maybe we're wrong about this. Maybe we'll learn and get some really useful insight from individuals on the political left about the SAVE Act. We'll start off with a Democrat Senator Richard Blumenthal, old Dick Blumenthal. What's he got to say?
Which is to say no to a bill that so fundamentally and far-reachingly would undermine, in fact, destroy our democracy. It may sound like an exaggeration, but it is the truth.
Okay, so it's going to destroy our democracy. Man, does that sound familiar? I'm trying to rack my brain here. It's going to destroy our democracy. Have you guys ever heard that before? Is that something that you've heard the Democrats mention, like maybe a time or two over the last decade? Yeah. Oh, actually, no. Now that I think about it, you're right. Yeah, that's what all Democrats have been saying for the last 10 years. Anything that the Republicans do, anything that Donald Trump does, is going to destroy our democracy. I will once again use this as a Nick Craig Show PSA reminder. We do not live in a democracy. We live in a democratic republic. But for those on the political left, democracy sounds a whole lot better. How about Mark Warner from Virginia, the great Democrat senator from the state just to our north? What does he have to say about the SAVE Act?
And let me say at the front end, I support voter ID.
Really?
We have voter ID in Virginia. I don't think you should be able to vote without showing a legitimate ID.
Now, hold on a second. What do you mean? Democrats have been rallying against voter ID now for years. What is Senator Mark Warner talking about here? We just listened to this debate not very long ago here in North Carolina, where Democrats fought tooth and nail against voter ID. They did the exact same thing down in Georgia, claiming that this was the end of democracy. The sky is falling. Groups won't be able to vote. You're going to disenfranchise voters. Nobody's going to be able to figure this out. Senator Mark Warner is really off script here with the Democrat Party.
But under this bill, that so-called reasonable policy would put in place requirements that are so stringent that it would mean if you don't have access to the right documentation, like a passport, you won't be able to vote for the President of the United States.
Wow. Yeah, these crazy, burdensome restrictions like verifying who you are, verifying that you are a U.S. citizen. That is burdensome documentation to prove when you show up and vote. How about old Chucky Schumer? We love hearing from him. He's always got great ideas as he represents the great people of New York State. What does he say about the SAVE Act?
It's cynical. It's beneath the Senate. It's beneath democracy. Senate Democrats will never let this rotten bill move through this body.
Okay, well, there you go. So there's a little taste for you of what the discussion and the argument actually is. It's the end of democracy. It's cynical. I don't know why asking somebody to verify their citizenship. I don't know what makes that inherently cynical, but that is what Chuck Schumer has to say. What about old pencil neck Adam Schiff, the great senator from California? We know how much he loves voter ID over in the blue state out on the West Coast. What about him?
Which brings me to the so-called Save America Act. This legislation will not save anything about America, but it will destroy something precious about this country.
Oh, no.
It is not meant to empower people to determine the direction of the nation, but to deprive them of that power. Not to encourage citizen participation in government, but to discourage it. Not to heal a nation that is badly divided, but to cause further division, disunion, and democratic decay.
Ugh, democratic decay from old Adam Schiff. He has a sign behind him that says the Save America Act disenfranchises 21 million Americans. That was the poster board that you and I paid for that was sitting behind him in the United States Senate yesterday, or last night, I should say, when he was debating this legislation. So I hope that I've laid out the point, and hopefully these Democrats have made the point in their ridiculous commentary that there's nothing really here with the Save America Act. If there were true issues with this legislation, and I genuinely believe this, and I've done a lot of research on the Save America Act. I think it's great legislation, and I think for the Senate Majority Leader and John Thune, he's got to get this thing across the finish line. If there were truly big-time issues with the Save America Act, Democrats would be bringing them up. And this goes back to one of my favorite things to talk about, which is the boy who cried wolf, which is currently where the Democrats have been now for the last decade. Anytime Republicans bring something up that they disagree with, it is always the same thing. We heard it right off the top when I played the clip from Senator Richard Blumenthal. This is going to destroy our democracy. This is what Democrats have been saying now for a decade with literally everything that Republicans bring forward. Literally anything that they concoct and bring up and try and pass in terms of legislation, it is this same narrative from those on the political left. And so I find myself in the position as a conservative, as a Republican that has watched this debate roll out in front of my very eyes for the last 10 years. I don't take this seriously. I can't take it seriously. It's the same reason that the boy eventually got eaten by the wolf, because the people stopped taking him seriously. Every single night, he yelled that there was a wolf, and there was never a wolf there. Eventually, there turned out there was a wolf, and nobody listened to him. And so the question that Democrats have got to answer today and over the next couple of weeks is this truly where the wolf is trying to eat somebody? Or is this another situation where they have no legitimate ideas to argue against? They can't really put together a coherent rebuttal of this legislation, so they go back and they start playing the greatest hits, which is end of democracy, disenfranchisement of voters. We have seen this stuff play out. I inherently reject these ideas. As I noted, I've watched the debate here in North Carolina. I watched the debate in Georgia, two states that have relatively recently, enacted voter ID. And none of the arguments that Democrats made, none of the doomsday scenarios that they brought up have ever even come close to fruition. Once again, in the primary elections that we just had here in North Carolina just a couple of weeks ago, which included voter ID, was the largest primary midterm election turnout ever in North Carolina history. If voter ID was disenfranchising voters, that would have not been the case. To me, this argument is shut and closed. We now will watch this process unfold over the next couple of weeks within the United States Senate. We'll keep you up to date right here on the Nick Craig Show. I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. Heard these same stupid, ridiculous arguments now for literally years. Everything is the end of democracy. It is so freaking exhausting. So we'll see maybe if Democrats are successful with that. Oh, and by the way, in the meantime, I caught this phenomenal article over at NBC News that ran yesterday. Most Americans support requiring photo ID to vote. Democrats in Congress reject it. This is over at NBCnews.com. As Republicans highlight the most popular policy in the Save America Act, Democrats say other provisions would disenfranchise U.S. citizens and that photo ID rules are unnecessary. When you've got NBC News writing a headline like that, the terrible left-wing entity that they are, when they're saying this, it should be a pretty strong indication that Democrats are on the losing side of this issue. And they, in fact, are, because we've looked into the numbers. We've looked at the data before. across race, gender, party affiliation. The vast majority of people support voter ID. This is another 80-20 issue that Democrats are on the wrong side of, and I hope it hurts them politically because they're fighting a ridiculously stupid battle that nobody is asking them to fight. The question is going to be, do Republicans in the United States Senate have the balls to get this thing over the finish line? With Lisa Murkowski and Tom Tillis and his typical bullshit up in Washington, D.C. I don't know. I really don't. I don't trust Tom Tillis. I'm very grateful that he's retiring, so we don't have to deal with him anymore. This is common sense legislation. By the way, he pushed for voter ID when he was the Speaker of the North Carolina House not very long ago. So we'll keep an eye on this and provide you the latest as it continues to play out right here on the program. Well, that's going to do it for a Wednesday edition. Thanks to the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support. Visit them online at lawgroupnc.com or give them a call, 910-251-6088. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and is heard weeknights 9 to 10 p.m. on WBT Radio in Charlotte. That's going to do it for this morning. We're back to you tomorrow right here